There is no shortage of questions asked about God, faith, miracles, and other aspects related to religion. Believers say it's all in the Bible, which is officially a collection of texts with sacred value for Christianity. Now, does the Bible really contain the answers for all these questions? And if so, would they all agree? Regarding the reality of the facts, it is known by many, especially scholars, that not everything about the life and work of Jesus Christ found in the biblical canon, especially the New Testament, it has been the subject of much controversy, since there are many questions about the infallibility and even the authenticity of the continuous books in this second phase of the pandemic. The fact is that there are numerous questionable points regarding the formation of the canon of the New Testament. 2. Even though for the vast majority everything is already in perfect harmony and fluency, through the teachings of Jesus Christ to the world, a large number of scholars believe it might not have been exactly like that. On the contrary, they would have been written by groups of men in different places and times, but always guided according to the wishes of the Catholic Church in life, from the first century to the second century. What leads to understanding is that over all these years, the Church might not have told the truth about Jesus Christ and more, that his real teachings would have been distorted and or suited to the realities of each era until the days after. But if the Bible does not match what really happened, or rather the true teachings of Christ, what else could it be? The answer might be in the books of Revelation. That is, a collection of writings that were not authorized by the Church and therefore did not make part of the Canon B in that first century. Christianity was beginning to gain strength, and even under aspects not very clear, was starting to become an even more comprehensive religion. Kim suggests that we do it. Even so, since the Jews were restricted only to the Old Testament, according to Norman Geisler and William Nix, the process of forming the New Testament canon was different than what happened as the Old Testament in some respects. Firstly, as Christianity was a religion from the start, international, there was no close prophetic community that received and collected the inspired books in a special place. Instead, there were local collections completed in the early days of the Church. However, there is no known official entity that oversaw the inspired writings. Therefore, it took centuries for all apostolic writings to be universally accepted. Fortunately, there are more manuscripts in the New Testament canon than in the Old Testament because of the greater availability of texts. Another aspect that differentiates the history of the Old Testament canon from the new one is, after discussions led to the recognition of the 27 canonical books of the New Testament, there were no more movements within Christianity to add or remove. The canon of the New Testament reached by God. We are a general council, the heart of the universal church. Already in the first century after Jesus' death, Christians divided due to different interpretations about his identity and in relation to the joint law. Hell, some groups like Christian Jews, the Bionites and the Nazarenes maintained the observance of the Torah and considered Jesus as a prophet or a Messiah. Other groups such as the Gnostics, the Docetists, and the Messianites emphasized Jesus' divinity and denied his humanity or connection to Judaism. Others, such as those from São Paulo, the Catrines and the Johannines, sought to reconcile the two natures of Jesus and establish a new covenant with God and the Gentiles. These divisions led to internal and external conflicts among early Christians, which were recorded in Paul's letters, the canonical Gospels, and the writings of the Church Fathers. Some of these conflicts involved issues such as circumcision, baptism, the Lord's Supper, the role of women, apostolic authority, and eschatology. And at the same time, some of these currents were considered heretical by Christian orthodoxy. That was based on the doctrine of the Trinity and the resurrection of Jesus. This orthodoxy was solidified by the councils and comedians from the 4th and 5th centuries that defined the creeds and canons of Christianity. That's it, but you will forget the vibrations soon. Where do they fit into this story? And what teachings of Christ are preserved in the books that were banned from the Nibunian plan? To reinforce, the Apocrypha are books that were not recognized as inspired by God, and therefore they are not part of the biblical canon of major religions. They were written by different authors in different times and places, and they reflect different views on history, doctrine, and spirituality of Christianity. Some of them have historical and moral value, but others contain contradictory, fanciful, or barren teachings. The number of apocryphal books is greater than that of the canonical Bible. It can always be counted as 13 billion. Of these, 52 relate to the Old Testament and 61 to the New Testament. Tradition has preserved other lists of canonical books. In public records, there are a varying number of. The authors of the apocryphal books are mostly unknown or uncertain. Many of them were attributed to names of biblical characters or religious authorities as apostles, prophets, patriarchs, or angels to lend more credibility to their writings. Authors used pseudonyms or wrote anonymously. Some of the most known or likely authors include Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher who wrote the book Inside the Sun's Fishpond, a reinterpretation of the biblical story. Enoch, a biblical patriarch who was said to have been taken to heaven by God and to have received revelations about the past and the future. He is the author to the books of Enoch, which are three: the first, the second, and the third book of Enoch. Ezra, a Jewish priest and scribe who led the return from Babylonian exile and the restoration of Moses' law in Jerusalem, is considered the attributive author. Distribution of the extra books. Mission 4. Solomon, a king of Israel famous for his wisdom and wealth. He is the author attributed to the books of Solomon, and there are three: the Wisdom of Solomon, the Psalms of Solomon, and the Testaments of Solomon, and the End, Tomi. One of the 12 apostles of Jesus, known for his disbelief and for his mission in India, he is the attributed author of the Thomas books, which are three: the Gospel of Thomas, the Acts of Thomas, and the Apocalypse. Because after all, what were the teachings of Jesus, which, for reasons we know only superficially today, ended up not being of interest to the Catholic Church of the 1st and 2nd centuries? Examples of these are the Gospel of St. Thomas, which is a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, written in the 2nd century. This gospel portrays Jesus as a mystical teacher who reveals hidden truths to his disciples, especially Thomas, who would be his spiritual genius. This gospel does not contain a narrative about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, only his teachings. Some examples: blessed are the solitary and the chosen, for they will find the kingdom, says Article 49. For where they came from, there they will return. The followers of the Gospel of Thomas believed that only a few chosen ones could understand Jesus' teachings, and in this way acknowledge his divinity, and immortality emanates. The Gospel of Peter recounts the passion and resurrection of Christ. Written in the late 2nd century or early 3rd century, this gospel contains details not found in the canonical gospels, like the cross speaking and emerging from the tomb alongside Jesus, and two angels, with the tomb being guarded by human and Jewish soldiers. datu sikatu. An example is the verse that says, "But Herod and the Jewish elders were very glad because they had done harm to Jesus, for they had sought to kill him many times and had not succeeded." Did you happen to know about the apocryphal texts? Do you really think it's possible that Herod's church in those distant centuries wanted in some way to maintain their sovereignty by publishing only what was of no interest to them? Or that indeed the authors of the apocryphal texts were mistaken? Tell us, leave a comment, okay? See you next time.